Fresh griddled bread, hot off the stove and slathered with butter and garlic, is quite the devilish temptation. Indian naan only requires a few simple ingredients to create a soft, rich, and chewy bread perfect for your next meal. Indian naan is reminiscent of a Mexican tortilla or chapati in technique and preparation, but very different in texture and flavor. There are many really good naan recipes online, but most of them contain ingredients that aren't traditional to Indian cuisine, like yeast, eggs, and baking powder. In creating my own naan recipe, I chose to go back to the basics and focus more on traditional ingredients to Indian cuisine. There's really no right or wrong ingredients, since naan recipes vary across India today and can include yeast, eggs, and leavening. Ultimately, choose ingredients you like and go for it. For my Indian naan recipe, you'll need bread flour, sugar, salt, whole milk, and plain yogurt. For an optional garlic butter topping, you'll also need garlic and butter. Since my recipe doesn't include yeast, I make the dough the night before or morning of the day I want to cook the bread. Without yeast, a minimum of 4 hours rest allows the gluten to develop and the yogurt to ferment like yeast. In a large bowl, we're going to add 360 grams of bread flour. And I like to use bread flour in this recipe because the higher gluten content produces a chewier bread. So then we're going to add 2 teaspoons of sugar, granulated sugar, and that's 12 grams. And then 1 teaspoon, which is 6 grams of salt. We want to give this a quick whisk to combine all the ingredients. Okay, make a little well here in the center of our flour mixture. We're going to pour in 171 milliliters, which is a half a cup plus 3 tablespoons of milk. I like to use whole milk because the fat in it softens and tenderizes the bread. Then we're going to add 161 grams of yogurt, and this is a half a cup plus 3 tablespoons. So the reason that yogurt is used in this recipe is because the bacteria in the yogurt ferments like yeast by converting the sugars and starches into carbon dioxide, which in turn creates pockets, making the dough rise, which is exactly what yeast does, right? So it also provides a softer texture to the bread. Now, as you're mixing this up, if you notice that it's a little dry or a little wet, just add a tablespoon more of flour or milk if you need to. We want a soft dough. Okay, once you've mixed it up enough with a spoon, move to your hand so that you can really feel the texture of the dough and see if you really need to add any more liquid or flour. Okay, now we're going to transition to a work surface. So just slightly flour your work surface and then remove your dough from the bowl. We're just kneading this enough so that all ingredients are combined. We want it smooth. The dough should be a little sticky and dense, but it should not be dry. Once you've shaped your dough into a nice little round ball and it's smooth, return the dough back to the bowl, cover it with plastic wrap, and we're going to store it in the fridge for a minimum of 4 hours. You could leave it up to 3 days in the fridge, just like this. Traditionally, naans are cooked in a tandoor, which is a cylindrical clay or metal oven. They can heat up to 900 degrees, but most home ovens only reach 500 degrees. A hot skillet over heat on the stove is an acceptable alternative in cooking naan at home. Go ahead, preheat your skillet. It should be a dry skillet over medium-high heat. While our skillet heats up, let's go ahead and divide the dough into 10 equal pieces. You can eyeball it or you can weigh each piece. You want a lightly floured surface. If you decide to weigh instead of eyeball the cuts, they should be about 70 grams each. You could start by eyeballing it and then you can move to weighing if you choose. We'll get 5 out of one side and 5 out of the other. I'm going to weigh mine just so I can make sure that I have pretty equal weight, but you don't have to. Once you have 10 dough balls, just make a nice ball out of them. They don't have to be perfect because we're just going to roll them out into more of an oval shape, but I just want to make them easy to roll out. Now, before you divide up the dough, you could actually need 2 teaspoons of minced garlic in the dough and then divide it up, and that will give you a stronger garlic flavor. If, though, you want maybe half garlic and half plain, you could put 1 teaspoon in half of the dough and knead it in and leave the other half plain. I'm not going to put garlic in my dough today. However, I am going to brush garlic butter over the tops and the bottoms and so they'll get that garlic flavor. So take each of your dough rounds. We just want to put them into sort of that non-oval shape. You could do rounds if you want. I'm going to use a rolling pin to flatten mine out, but you could just push out the dough like this if you don't have a rolling pin or don't want to use one. If you don't have a rolling pin, you could always just use a drinking glass and roll out your dough. Your naans should be about 1/4 inch thick. If you want a chewy naan, that is. If you want a crispy naan, just roll them out thinner. So that's sort of the size we're looking for. You know your skillet's warm enough when you can splatter water in it and it sizzles. So we're gonna place one naan in the skillet. We're gonna let it cook for a minute or two. Brown spots should form on the underside and bubbles should form on the top. We've got a few bubbles forming on top. The underside is nice and brown, so we're gonna go ahead, flip it over, let it cook for another 1 to 2 minutes. As the naan finishes baking, we're gonna place it on a heat-proof plate lined with foil and cover it with another sheet of foil, and we'll stack the naan as they're cooking. Okay, back side is done. Begin placing it on our plate and covering with foil. Okay, we'll add our next one. While each of our naan bakes, we will create an assembly line and roll out the next one in line. As you're cooking the naan, between 2 to 3 naan, you may notice that flour starts to burn in your skillet. Just take a paper towel, and you could do this over the sink if you would like, and you just wipe the flour out just to keep it from burning, and then add your next naan. As you're baking the naan, over time you'll want to turn the heat down because their heat skillet really starts to heat up, and they may cook faster than you'd like. So notice the last couple that we've baked. That one's got a little brown on that side, but the other sides look really good, and that one looks good all over. While keeping the naan stacked on a plate with foil over the top keeps them warm. If you want to keep them warm for longer, because it's going to be a while before you eat, you can place the heat-proof plate with the stacked naan in an oven. It's set at 200 degrees with a foil cover, and it'll keep them warm. Okay, our naan are all cooked, baked. You could stop here and serve your naan now. If you want a little extra indulgence and garlic flavor, then melt a couple tablespoons of butter, add some minced garlic. So stir your garlic and butter together. Because the butter is heated, the garlic will help to infuse the butter. But the minced garlic, we want the pieces on the naan. So we'll take one of them and then just brush some of that butter on it. And I like to do both sides, get some of that garlic, and as it cools, the butter will soak into the naan, okay? It definitely gives them lots of flavor. You could save this if you want and add the garlic butter when you serve your bread. You could also give your guests a little bit of garlic butter sauce and have them dip it in there if they want, like you would lobster. Okay, I'm just gonna do 2 as an example. If you decide to put garlic and butter on your naan, you could also add some black sesame seeds, some white sesame seeds, or some nigella seeds, which are black cumin seeds. The butter, though, would help keep the seeds on. So let's take a look at the naan we have. Let's look at this one. So one thing you'll notice about the naan that's not made with yeast is notice it's very flimsy, and notice how it tears. It's very, very chewy because it doesn't have the yeast in it. The yogurt is what makes this so chewy, and the fat in the whole milk. It's very, very tender. That's what you're gonna have with a naan that has the dairy in it instead of the yeast or the leavening. And it's just a nice, good, hearty bread. Enjoy naan with hummus or dips like eggplant baba ganoush. Serve it as a meal accompaniment or alone. It goes great with grain dishes, curries, lentils, and paneer or meat cooked in a sauce. You could even top the bread with veggies, meat, and cheeses to make a quick little pizza. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing to my channel. As always, I'm very thankful and blessed for your support. Until next time, go bake the world.